Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. If you're new to the channel or as you watch it on replay, thank you for watching, and like, share, and subscribe if possible. And tonight we're going to be looking at a different case, and we're going to be looking back at the Idaho 4. And if you're not familiar with the Idaho 4, it's about the homicides of these college students that occurred. Pull this, get it up here where I can see everything. Whoop. Get it to full screen. There we go, guys. Back in November 13th, 2022, which is now is just a 2-year anniversary of the death of these 4 college students, Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zana, that occurred in the early morning hours in Moscow, Idaho. These 4 students, through that investigation, we got to see something as far as how law enforcement works, which was a little bit different than what we're comparing it to tonight, as far as the Delphi case, which took many years. Well, with this case, it only took a few weeks for law enforcement to identify an individual and able to go out, obtain probable cause affidavits for search warrants and arrest, and which has brought us to this point. If you have any information regarding this case, absolutely make sure that law enforcement, prosecutor, defense has that information, for as like we have in the other cases, for justice to be found, law enforcement has to have all the information, the prosecution, the defense, so that best justice can be found for them. And like I said, tonight we're going to be discussing certain aspects of what occurred as far as the investigations of Delphi, and will that have an effect on the web sleuth community? We are currently seeing a great divide of opinion. Did the jury find the right offender and the right finding through the evidence that was presented to them in court? Of course, it's divided. There's still a subset out there that believes the wrong individual was charged and found guilty. Personally, I do not think that's the case. I think that the jury got it right with information and my understanding of law enforcement and how crime scenes. Although I was worried that we was going to have a hung jury, turns out that that wasn't the case. That the jury was convinced by the evidence presented through the prosecution. And what does that mean for the defense attorneys as they approach and seeing that what happened in Delphi? It's not going to change their strategy much, but it may change the opinion of some of the people out there in the web sleuth genre of how they look at this case, seeing that the differences, although there's a lot of similarities between these 2 cases in some aspects, but there are also some differences. Whereas while they had a partial profile DNA regarding Delphi, there they have a full profile of DNA from the crime scene, which is a huge difference. And what does that mean? And while the DP wasn't on the table in Delphi, it is on the table here. And those filings have been made. And currently right now, there's some motions before the court And through those motions, they're just prepping for if there is a similar finding of guilt against Kohberger, then they're looking for the appeal process. So a lot of that stuff is going on. But of course, this here is Brian Kohberger, who was a student at another college that was adjacent to Moscow. And like I said, if you have any information, these are the contact information from the tip line, email, and even for the FBI. But we're going to be discussing some things and of how some of the subtle differences, but also a lot of similarities as far as the processing of crime scenes, how the CSI evaluated certain steps taken by law enforcement, because on both of these, with the Delphi, we saw that while we had a video of an individual, in this case, we don't have the video of the individual, but we have a live witness that was within feet of the offender. But we do have video of his vehicle. We had video of the offender's vehicle of Richard Allen's in Delphi. So there's some similarities, even with the video, that while it didn't identify the individual to the point that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, they existed in both. And law enforcement obtained those videos early on in both investigations. Now, we saw with the videos in with Delphi that they didn't bring them to the table or put them out there for any type of identification purposes. We saw that with the vehicle in the early days, as far as what type of vehicle, the color, movements, and some of the information. And we also found out early on in the investigation of Idaho that there was obviously a DNA profile, because they were quickly eliminating certain persons as far as persons of interest, the boyfriends, family members, normally people that were within our orbit of suspects that would take weeks and months to clear. They were clearing them within hours. And so you knew there was a DNA, or there had to be some type of information that law enforcement had that absolutely was easy to eliminate persons of interest. And of course, that's one of the differences. While I do believe that somewhere within the evidence with Delphi that there is a DNA profile there that will be identified. And we saw even in court that law enforcement held back on some of the article or some of the hairs for the fact they didn't want them consumed in case they could be used as technologies advanced and got to the level of whereas because they didn't want to consume some of that DNA evidence. I don't always agree with some of the strategies that law enforcement has, but and I most certainly didn't agree with that. But it is what it is, and will they now have it there in reserve, and will they process it at some point when technologies advance to the abilities of being able to identify that type of DNA? I absolutely believe that, sure, at some point in the future, the abilities of technologies, along with the DNA capabilities of that, they will advance, and what the future holds for us as far as the abilities of technologies is far more advanced than what we currently see. And while we had witnesses in both crimes, we had witnesses that saw the Richard Allen on the trails that day. We have a witness that saw an individual that is currently accused of the case, Kohberger, within or matching the similar physical attributes as far as bushy eyebrows, build, height, and we may even and fits. I would expect within some of the evidence, such as the shoe print that was just outside the door, that that law enforcement recovered due to the eyewitness says that he passed by here in this certain location, and they were able to recover a shoe print from that. And even that shoe print, there's been a lot of argument about, well, that doesn't prove anything. To me, as far as the CSI world, it proves that Kohberger's footprint fits within that profile or those parameters of that recovered shoe print, because they would have never mentioned it in any of the probable cause affidavits regarding Kohberger if it was outside of that. Uh-oh. My computer turned off there for a second, guys. I hope it's still up. Yeah, don't want to lose my computer. It may be just that I was away from it long enough and I hadn't clicked on a slide. But anyway, before we get too far, let me go into chat. Hello, Marion. Hello, Junior Johnson. Good to see you. Gail Hurd. James Tate. Thank you. Appreciate you. Sensei. Hello. Olivia too. Good to see you. I'm having a little bit earlier show tonight than our last few shows. Just trying to get back with some of the other audience there. Josh LaPosh, good to see you as always. If you have any questions about anything, absolutely throw them in here. Yvette, good to see you. Yeah, Josh LaPosh says, I haven't thought about Kohberger in a long time now. Yes. And it's, where are we, in the social media world of web sleuths, the people who were involved with the Delphi case, Abby and Libby, which was one of, the attention drawn to it was absolutely necessary for the fact that we're looking at the homicides of 2 innocent children. Much like this case, we're looking at the homicide of 4 innocent children, although they're college students that did not deserve what happened to them. So it's going to be a high-profile case as it moves forward next year when it goes to trial. Hopefully it'll get into trial next year. I don't see any reason it wouldn't. And we see, just like with Richard Allen, it would take a while, but what will we see that happens with this case? Let's see here. Allegedly Lisa. That's a great name. Jill Moser, good to see you. Oh, that's funny. Allegedly. Josh Posh says it's been 2 years. Yes. We were just 1 day plus anniversary, 2 years. Bama Sin, good to see you. Anna says, about a month before that, we had a double homicide in New Meadows near where I live. Lunatic from Oregon. He's in a mental hospital. Yeah, there's a lot of evil out there, as we've seen. And what will we see with this case? Sharon Edwards, good to see you. Alleged Lisa says, I don't believe they have the right person in Delphi case. And I have no problem with opposing opinions whatsoever, because we have to have those opposing opinions to ensure that our court systems are just and that the appeal process works. Kohberger's going to write his PhD from death row. I believe so. And that's something that we that if you took it and compared apples to apples, that and how much evidence that if you looked at what happened in Delphi plus versus what is occurring with and what we know of this case, as far as the digital evidence of Kohberger having linked up with the Wi-Fi at that residence, any contacts that he may have had with any of the victims, the DNA profile, which is huge, And just the DNA profile that was found at the crime scene from a type of knife that is in his list of items that he had purchased at one point in his life is huge, far more than what we had with Delphi. And so, um, will the attorneys take notice? Probably not. That they have been working on a strategy that began far sooner than what the verdict came down just a few days ago regarding Delphi. Now, have they taken new notice of that? Probably so. And they know what they're facing. They know the struggle, uphill battle. But one of the things they're not having to face is that Kohberger hasn't confessed 60 something times. But what we don't have, and that balances it out, is while Kohberger hasn't confessed 60 something times, his DNA profile is at the crime scene. And his DNA profile was found early on within hours of the, and was collected and was sent to the lab and processed even before they knew who Kohberger was. And those arguments are going to go through the court system. But we have a balance there that, yes, we don't have the 60 something confessions. We don't have any information that only an offender would know, such as what was presented in the Delphi case. But we do have a DNA profile from a piece of evidence that didn't belong at the crime scene, from a knife sheath that fit, that could have caused the injuries to those victims. And so with those balancing out each other, I think it's a long, hard battle for the defense, just as much as what trying to overcome 61 or 60 plus confessions. Overcoming that DNA profile is going to be a hill and a mountain to climb. And is it possible? Absolutely. Anything is possible, but I just don't see it happening without a huge and a great defense brought. Junior Johnson, guilty, fair enough. And Josh says, thought they had the right person to Delphi. I'm more certain in Idaho. And I think that's what most people are going to be along those lines. Whereas those that were hesitant, and I thought of a hung jury, not before. I always thought of his, my personal opinion. And the speculation was, yes, they had the right guy in Delphi. And I believe the same for here. But when I saw the presentation of the state, I was concerned about a hung jury. And I may be the exact same way once I see the presentation on this case. But right now, not having it and not having the jury selected and not getting to that point, I don't see it in that manner. I am at the same level that I was with Delphi a month prior to. Just my personal opinion. Of course, Kohberger, just like Richard Allen, was innocent until proven guilty. That's not the case anymore with Richard Allen. He's been found guilty, and so he's a convict now, and will be sentenced in December. And so, what will happen with this case? What will that jury do? That is, and we even have the similarities of that. Both of these individuals whereas a jury was brought in for Richard Allen, with this case, of course, he'll be moved to another jurisdiction, and so that the jury will be pool won't be tainted or exposed to what, and I believe that's fair. In any of these highly publicized and high profile cases, you want to get that jury away from those towns of where the and from the jury pool of where people within that community may overreact and just, we want those outsiders where there's a little bit less knowledge, because everyone within Moscow absolutely would have followings, and whereas they may not have drawn a close opinion of it, but they may have family members that have. So let me get back up there and change that. Beth Brimberry, good to see you. Hannah's already coming up. Kohberger will have to explain his DNA on a knife sheath under a victim. Perhaps he sold the knife sheath at a yard sale. And then, of course, but we have to look at the totalities of the circumstances, that whoever would have bought that knife sheath at a yard sale would have to be driving a vehicle on the same night that Kohberger was out gazing at the stars during the time that his phone was turned off. So there has to be a lot of parallels that that he will have to overcome, because it is going to be a huge mountain to climb to overcome this, that the same individual whose DNA on that knife sheath just happened to be out riding around and happened to turn his phone off at a critical time and happened to turn it on, and whose devices had at one point linked up. So, we have to look at a lot of information on this. And of course, like I said, the DNA stuff, as far as the statistics that matches Brian Kohberger's being at the crime scene. And then, of course, each little bit of this, of all this stuff that law enforcement had, the only thing that we're missing really, as far as some of the law enforcement, is where law enforcement put that vehicle identification, even before they knew who Kohberger was, that they were looking for that vehicle, that model, or that type of vehicle, that I wish that Delphi had done similar versus doing sketches. Now, law enforcement absolutely would have known certain characteristics about the offender due to the witness that was there, that was within a few feet of him. But they did put out there about the vehicle. They had all that cameras, and what digital evidence that existed at the point would have consisted of that. Now, were they doing all the cell tower and the geofencing? Sure. The Wi-Fi connections, was Kohberger on that? Some of that data, or within some of the information, they just hadn't been able to link him at that time? Probably so. Would they have been able to link him at some point? Probably so. But due to law enforcement and other officers finding his vehicle, being able to get some DNA, which led to a quick arrest and a quick path to our court systems. I was pretty impressed with this investigation, really was. Far more than I was impressed with what occurred at Delphi. Now, when we finally see the crime scene processing that we will see in the next few months, that occurred within the residence in Moscow, do I expect that it will be a little bit more extensive? I'm hoping so. I'm hoping we don't see the same type of mistakes or lack of following through. And that's another similarity that we have to look at, that with what happened in Delphi, we have a vehicle that had no DNA that was found in it from the crime scene. With Kohberger, we have a vehicle, once again, that was processed, and currently we know of no DNA linking Kohberger to the victims or the crime scene inside the vehicle. And can it be missed? Could it be cleaned? Yes, because we're dealing One of them, we had 5 years where DNA could have degraded. This time we're dealing with an individual who is um, his whole life or his adult age and going through school and advanced studies was in the criminal uh, element of attaining his degree. Uh, and did he understand crime scenes processing? And absolutely, what research did he do on that? Was he capable of being able to um, possibly dress in a certain manner so that he didn't shed any DNA um, or didn't transfer any DNA from the crime scene to his vehicles? All great questions. And we're just going to have to see the processes that the CSI. I was shocked that if you had a crime scene, when I first learned of what um, the seizure of his vehicle, the searches of his vehicle, and that currently we have no DNA from any of the hearings saying that Kohberger's DNA or from the victims has been transferred to his vehicle, that he was known to enter into within minutes of the scene, of leaving the scene and driving. Absolutely remarkable. Now, are there certain procedures and processes that he could have taken that would have allowed such DNA not to be transferred? Yes. I did some testing on that, and I'm interested in um, what y'all's thoughts about that are. Yes, Mark Ferris says on the RA interview had not been misfiled, they could have tracked down more security camera footage from around town to confirm or disprove his movement that day. Moscow, they had his car day one. Absolutely, they went out there knowing what type of time frame that they were looking at, and one of the mistakes is rather than um, not a mistake, but as far as what criminals do, that of course the Kohberger, if he is the offender, committed this crime in a time frame of very little traffic. And with modern technologies and all the cameras that are out there now, and probably tenfold that now than what even 2 years ago, where I've always had security cameras on places I lived um, and still have. But um, but now it's even more common. And so we're going to see, just like we saw the advancements from Delphi to what this case was, um, the next big mainstream homicide, will we see even more advanced and more camera systems and test studies that this is how you conduct an investigation. That if you have a crime that occurs within certain hours, now that you go out there and you do that camera canvas, you'll secure all that security tape. And if that offender drove those roadways, you're going to be able to track him, and you're going to do that geofencing regardless of where it goes in the future as far as some of the technologies and if the court allows some of that. There's a lot of stuff going on. The Saint, hello. Yeah. Sin, Paula, hello. The Saint, I'm not going to be able to read some of the Saints' comments there. Uh, uh, Marion takes it. Is it as old as your phone, the laptop? Yes, I've had two failures in the last month. I had one of my old cell phones um, has went to the digital graveyard, and also one of my computers. Olivia too. Hello. Saint says that Kohberger is done for. I believe that's going to be the case. I really do. Yes, ma'am, saying I did swap it out a little bit earlier tonight, and just to because I'm going to be on the road early. Well, sometime tomorrow, I'm going back on the road. I've got to head back up to Georgia, um, and so Barbara's here. Good to see you. Says I didn't get a notification. Sorry, I'm late. You're not late. And Anna and I agree on this. The DNA is more damning, absolutely. Um, and that's going to be just like, can a jury overlook that DNA? Can that DNA, how would it, you know, how would, is it possible and how will the defense explain that away? Um, I have no idea how they will ever be able to explain that knife sheath of and especially if that knife sheath, the profile or um, the injuries that these victims sustained, if those injuries are consistent with a knife that fits within that sheath, how in the world will you ever separate? I just don't see how it's possible. Just don't see how it. In your opinion, do you think Dylan knew Kohberger and that's why she noticed the bushy eyebrows? Um, no, I don't know if um, um, the reason of that, other than um, I know a lot of women are drawn to eyes. Mrs. Steve um, is absolutely. Um, I can ask her whenever she meets someone or she talks about somebody, her first comments, and I don't know if it's of something that is within the mind or uh, that we process certain information, that was she so focused that she was watching him to see which way his eyes were focused? Were they, did they, as possible being prey or being victimized, are you watching that predator or that person that you don't know? Are they looking at you? And is that the reason that she was paid so much special attention to the eyes? Some of the ladies out there, give your opinion. Is that something that y'all look at whenever you're first looking at a man or any individual? Do you notice that part as far as where their attention is looking, and especially about the eyes? I know Mrs. Steve puts a lot of weight upon the eyes. Yeah, Saint, I can see you. Hello, Holly. Saint, thanks. Been trolling so much. Never know if I'm hidden. No, you're not. Oh, not trolling here, but on other channels. Mm-mm-mm. Saint. Uh, okay, Saint. Be careful about talking about other channels. Allegedly, Lisa. One of the problems I have with Delphi, the sister's hair was in one of the victim's hand. It was not just hair, but hair by the root. That bothers me. Um, I'm not so much. I mean, we're talking about um, if this hair belonged to a stranger, yes, but we're talking about someone that was dressed in the other clothing of the sister that owned that clothing, and so uh, and even had stayed overnight there. And I don't see it as something, and the jury didn't either. The jury weighed that evidence, and they didn't see whereas that put up any red flags. Hello, little one. Junior Johnson says, I hope Richard Allen confesses and apologizes to families at sentencing. That would be nice. But if that's so, if that does occur, the appeals are off. So I don't imagine that's going to happen. And that's what I'm saying, Marcus. Absolutely. While we had well, some of what you speak of here is exact same with Rich Allen. Suspect had no alibi. Car that was seen passing the camera similar to Richard Allen's. So we had that. The big thing is here is that DNA on a sheet under a victim. And yes, and it's fair enough, Lisa. Absolutely. If that's something that bothers you, and there's no big problem looking upon that, because, like I said, we should look at that and question. And the jury looked at it, I'm sure, about that. It was presented to them, so there was some weight given to it. But no, there's no problem with always questioning. Saying I'm bald and I still get hair everywhere. Oh, imitation crab, good to see you. And Anna says that she still has questions about Delphi. Fair enough. Do you think they will televise the trial? I hope so. We saw what happened with and I am so thankful for these other YouTube creators that went to give us these details that without them we would have only had snips and limited information. But with what happened, regardless if you agree with each of the channels, whatever their agenda or their narrative was, we were still getting detailed notes. And could some of them be biased? Absolutely. But even within that biased information, there's truth. And so I do not want to see that that occur again. I much rather be able to see the witnesses' testimony, their body language, the apps, the evidence presented in what context, and understanding how it was documented, recovered, processed, testing done, the experts and all their mannerisms, and have a better understanding of what's going on with the trial and the witnesses is extremely important. And I hope that we do get this one televised. I hope that the court systems across the country take note of that. Sure, he was stargazing. That will go well for Kohberger. Like I said, was he stargazing later? Was he stargazing that night? Absolutely possible. You know, because we're dealing just like with Delphi, we have an offender, Rich Allen being an offender that immediately went back into his normal life activities, with no one within his orbit being the wiser. And we see a lot of that similarities with what was going on with Kohberger. He was able to immediately, if he is the one responsible for these homicides, to within minutes operate a vehicle in a manner that is within the laws, that didn't draw attention to himself as far as law enforcement stopping him or discovering him driving like a maniac around the streets. That everything that is seen through the videos afterwards of him returning to his residence and everything, and instantly within hours going back into his normal lifestyle. There's a lot of stuff that we see that parallels what we saw recently in the other trial. Yeah, and there are some differences that BK Kohberger hasn't threatened that we know of, and being of an older, uh, I look at college kids as kids also. Although they are older, they're in a little bit different environment, but there's still innocence that no matter what they were doing in their lives, they didn't deserve what this. But it is, yeah, it is a little bit different. It's not two children. This is older adults that were targeted, and whereas we don't know exactly when Abby and Libby were targeted, we have a little bit better understanding of when um, uh, these kids were targeted because we have at least 12 interactions of where Kohberger went within that area, linked up either on their Wi-Fi. And so we have a little bit better understanding that, yes, they were targeted, that went on for a substantial time versus just moments before. And it could be the same for Delphi, that they were targeted a long time before through catfishing and otherwise. We just didn't see any evidence of that. We have seen evidence of this occurring with Idaho 4. All right. Yeah, there is issues that if you did see a stranger in your house and you was in fear, and I agree that why wouldn't you immediately call 911? So that is something that I don't know what, like you, I don't know what the defense would do with that. Right. Oh, these defense lawyers have the greatest imaginations. I think most are crazy, not insane, like Richard Allen and Kohberger. The defense attorneys are crazy, or the defendants. Um, um, do they know his motive? Um, well, it'd be like what obsession, what a fantasy did he have about which victim? And of course, we will probably find out in the trial more about which one of probably the first two victims in the upstairs that was targeted that absolutely was, um, uh, and what that motive would be. Is it some type of, the stalking and motive? Is it, um, you know, um, what fantasy did he have with those victims that would cause him to commit such a crime uh, and attack them within um, a certain time window? Because we still don't fully understand how far this would have occurred. If Kohberger had entered the residence and there was only one victim upstairs, would there have been other victims? Or was it something of where chaos developed and it escalated into that we created such a rumble that we have other witnesses, that potential witnesses, and that Kohberger had to engage with them to conceal his crime. And after engaging with them and committing additional homicides, then leaving the residence. Um, and so it could have went that originally Kohberger went in there with a simple intention of attacking and committing some horrible crime that slowly escalated into something far worse. Now, do I think that Kohberger's fantasy was, oh, I'm going to go within a residence and commit 4 homicides? No, I personally don't. Just my personal opinion, don't think that was any part of his fantasy that night. Going in there and committing a certain crime against 1 or 2, being organized offender, carrying a weapon of intimidation, yes, that's possible that he may have known there was 2 there, but it's still that he lost control and it escalated into something, and having to go to the second floor and attacking 2 more additional victims. I just don't think that was his original intent. Regardless of his intent, we know what the results were. And I would agree with you saying that, yes, both of them is of the essay. I agree with you, Mary and Tate, that I cannot believe they tore down the house. I still regret that. And we'll see what happens with it. Dandy Lance, where's his shower curtain? He's a big guy to be taking baths. And that's a good point. I'm a guy. I wouldn't be, and I take showers. I haven't taken a bath probably 50 plus years. Taking showers. Ivy Rose, good to see you. Kohberger, I don't know how to pronounce your name there, Banter Lines. Could have worn a hazmat suit and seats cover. Yes. Mrs. Steve and I did some Tyvek testing and layers. And actually, Daniel with the Drunk Turkey Show requested some of the testing the other day. I sent that to him, so I don't know what he has up his sleeve about that. And yes, Anna's absolutely right. Kohberger is in a graduate level criminology student, and his knowledge of how criminals act, understanding of motivations, and even the survey that he did. I think it was in his home state or up in Pennsylvania, of where he was obtaining some earlier of his college career and working with I can't think of her name, a professor of when he did that survey asking those questions, extremely leading questions about how criminals commit certain crimes. Mr. Steve, this is from the Saint. Did he leave that knife sheath out of hubris or just a mistake in your opinion? Mistakes. Criminals make mistakes. We see that in all of them. Nobody commits this perfect crime. It's never been done, never will be. Now, does law enforcement miss key evidence? Absolutely. That does occur. But they found this, and it's amazing that whoever processed, and I have to give kudos, I don't know who processed that knife sheath at the lab that had the understanding of taking that swab and hitting that and able to locate that small bit of DNA in that area. Brilliant, and they deserve and will get a lot of recognition for that at some point of this trial. His attorney trims up his brows, has for months. It was reported on YouTube News. I don't know which one, maybe LNC. I don't know, but you can see in any of his pictures that, yes, uh, the eyebrows are very distinguishable. Alexa, good to see you. Yes, apparently DNA is only found for 10% of crimes, various reasons. And I understanding Locard's exchange principle of that whatever environment you are normally in, and even of your own self, that you carry your environment with you. And when you go to a new environment and you leave that environment, you take something from that and you leave something. And so while only 10% of it is recovered, and I had in all my career of working homicides, um, DNA, not just homicides, but other cases also, DNA was not a big part of it. We had DNA on several cases, but and it was not a large part of it. And but now I was in a different generation of when DNA. I was there during the early years of it being junk science back then, of it being argued how reliable is it, because they didn't fully understand it back in the 80s and the early 90s. As far they had an understanding of it, but it was being contested within the courts of how reliable it was in those early years. Yes, you're talking about that, uh, and that's something else about that. Finding mixtures of DNA, that offenders mixtures along with victim mixtures, it's easily able that one can cover up the other, and it's hard to identify a profile sometimes from a mixture. Ah, let's see here. Since I said safe travel, Steve, I'll watch out for watch out for Waffle Houses. Thank you uh, for your membership. 23 months. Very kind of you. I don't even know what number that is. 634 septillion. Uh, that's way above my pay grade. Um, when will the judge Hippler rule on motion to remove DP? I don't know. I know that some of the motions were have been put up last week. Right now, they're throwing everything at it. Do I think it'll get removed from the table? Uh, Looking at the mitigating circumstances of what is required for it to stand, I don't think it will get. But that doesn't mean that the defense won't throw everything there, so that they, through the appeal process, if it does reach that he is sentenced to that, that they'll start appealing it on that for those reasons. Elevate the process. Good to see you. And Beth says, in both cases, seems the crimes were conducted by more than one person. The only issue that we have with this is that were the cameras with, we had no cameras of Delphi. We had no witnesses. So of where the crime scene occurred and where the Abby and Libby deaths occurred. But with this case here, we had a witness that heard the struggles upstairs, of course, related them to playing with a dog, and then came within feet of a single offender leaving from the area of where two of the victims' deaths occurred. And so we have a live witness here that says only saw one offender and had looked out on several occasions, not seeing someone, but when did encounter, only encountered one person. And whereas there has been arguments, and even the CSI guy for Delphi, like myself, has questions how certain injuries can occur and not have defensive wounds. And how can that be? And what uh, can occur at a crime scene that would not allow someone to fight back? I still have those questions for Delphi. Always will have, unless Richard Allen tells us how that occurred. Uh, Now, that is not going to be the case with, from my understanding uh, of uh, Idaho, that we will have those defensive injuries. I haven't heard any complaints from Brian to hurry up with a trial so he can go home since he's innocent. Nope, just delays. Bamasin is one of those that didn't like RA's eyes the first time saw his pitch. Miss Steve didn't either, and Kohberger um, did not. You know, did he intentionally leave it? I really don't think so. Don't think so. But could have, Saint. And thank you for your $2 or £2 donation. Thank you. Yeah, Alexa says, and this is a good point, that looking at him and not being able to identify any other parts, not seeing the knife, but through my testing, you can see whereas a knife could be easily missed. But so probably the only thing that stood out was his eyebrows. And I've got to get my video back out, and I will in the coming up days. I'll get my video of in the low light conditions of my mannequin of coming across the floor on some of my testing. And Legay Ames agrees with Alexa that you're wearing a mask, brows only part of face to see. But I just didn't know that even if the face isn't covered, is that something that, especially as far as now in law enforcement, we're trained to look at hands. It, when I'm, no matter where I'm at, if I'm going in a store or walking the streets, walking a park, I'm always looking for two hands. I couldn't tell you what facial features. You can walk right past me. If anyone ever walked, asked me what does so and so look like, I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you about um, uh, are they carrying a weapon, and where their cell phone is, and what their hands look like, and where their hands were, uh, because it's so ingrained in us to look at those hands to identify about those hands, because hands is what harms or you know uh, can bring the weapons to bear. Sharon says, why do you think in the Delphi case that the state kept talking about involving others in tentacles? That is a mystery to me. I think that up until the confessions, that there was a large contingent part of law enforcement that thought there was more than one offender. And I think all the way up until those confessions, that was probably something that had been discussed on the roundtable quite a bit, that there's other involved. And has that been brought to, and will that ever be put to the side? Who knows? I like this, Ryan. BK, stargazing and driving around. RA, fish watching and stock ticker. I like that. Vanderline says, I think Kohberger was mimicking a movie actor who played Batman. Who knows? He says, Johnny, the music movie channel says that's why we might have sent Indiana FBI to Idaho. Was they operating as a team, Mr. True Crime Whip? Um, in their early time, yes, I could see whereas, but no, they weren't. There's no link between um, those two cases, if that's what you're, I don't believe. Paula says that on another of Steve's strings, I confused this case with the Delphi case. Yes, I did testing for both of them, and then that testing, some of it overlaps. Absolutely, you know, it doesn't matter when you're looking at edge weapons and you're looking at those injuries; they're going to be very similar. So yes, there's a lot of things that probably would overlap from one scene because blood spatter is blood spatter. Doesn't matter if it's inside, indoors, outdoors, leaves, trees, transfers, footprints, all of that doesn't matter. Blood spatter is a consistent science of what does occurs with blood and velocity and impacts and passive flows is repeatable. And that's how come blood spatter is a science. And you can look at that blood spatter and determine stories of what that blood tells you about that crime scene. And that's how come it's so important. Sharon says that I notice eyes and sometimes can sense evil in their eyes. Mrs. Steve swears by it. Olivia says, I definitely think Kohberger was possibly intimidated by women. Um, did Mrs. Steve grow up or spend significant amount of time in moderate to high crime area? Not that I'm aware of. Metro, well, the area of Metro Atlanta, of where I first met Mrs. Steve, wasn't, and of course, where I live uh, is not high crime. Um, and I don't pay much attention to eyes, but I always lived in very low crime areas. Seems rejections creates serial offenders. There's a lot of. I'm gonna. I need to get a couple experts in the field, and I have. I need to get with Dr. Susan, and we're going to do a show that's coming up probably in a few weeks, and I will remind me Banner Lines to ask her specifically about this, about that trilogy. Yes, the hearing so far, of course, we've had where there is cameras there. So is that a good indicator that it's going to go all the way through to the trial? I'm hoping so. Early on, and this isn't a bad, speculative remark. Who recalls hearing BK regularly jog with another fella, also initials BK, who was shot by law enforcement? I suspect he assisted the alleged BK in quadruple murder. Not that I have any idea if he did or not, but law enforcement will have looked at those phones and if Kohberger had any um, other person that possibly could have been assisting him. Although in the early days, as far as the Bolo, before Kohberger was identified, they were or it had been mentioned or speculated that there was a possibility of a driver. And so we'll find out more about that. but I think he was a lone wolf also. Yeah, Judge announced his retirement this week. Little one. I'm too short to notice. And this is something. I also think there's a good possibility that Brian had been into that house before. Absolutely. I do too. With or without or during a party or not, but even if they were out of the residence, there is a possibility that he could have been inside. We know that he was close enough to link up with the Wi-Fi. When is BK on trial? I think it's July of next year. Kohberger had so much going for him, intelligent man, but throwing it all away, and for what? And he's not the first of anyone. There's the intelligence level of some of these offenders and their fantasies. Um, you know, um, you have to look at um, uh, people such as Bundy or BTK. Of course, BTK not being off the chart intelligence, but probably smarter than average and was organized. And when you have organized offenders, you have a higher intelligent level than when you look at disorganized offenders. And so with Kohberger, you're looking at the upper realm of organization, organized. Even the questions he asked in his survey that he did in on the East Coast when he was attending schools and classes. Like I said, I think it was Pennsylvania, if my memory serves me correct. Uh, that that is obtaining information that would be beneficial if you were going to commit such a crime. Yeah, junk. Hope I didn't miss anything. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that thought that he could have left it, but I would think if he left it, it wouldn't have been under a victim, and I think it would have been um, placed in an area that says, "This is me." Um, just as I believe that the sticks in Delphi were placed there with whatever intent, whatever message it meant to the offender, um, for the fact for you to proclaim that this is your crime scene, you'll go out of your way and you'll make it absolutely obvious. And of course, leaving a sheath under a victim is pretty obvious, but uh, I think it would have been more. I think um, some of these individuals, when they stage a crime and they're laying claim to it, they want you to see the first thing that you see, they want you to see their signature. They want you to see that I'm the one responsible for this. And hiding the sheath under a victim doesn't fit that to me. I may be absolutely wrong, but it just doesn't fit it to me. And yes, Dandy, that yes, if he was as and he had some knowledge of how um, and a better understanding of the digital age and the technologies that are out there because he had uh, wanted to enter law enforcement in a field addressing data. And so, yes, obtaining data through the internet would not have been something foreign to Kohberger. Holly says, my theory is he went to another college, so he saw them elsewhere. Mad Greek. Oh, you're talking about the restaurant where one worked. Yes, They rejected his advances. Mad Greek had a warning against BK on file, remember? And that's what started it. Very possible. And like I said, when did the targeting start? And we will have a better understanding of the exact dates and times of when he linked up for him to be able, just whatever happened at the Mad Greek or at any location where this offender might be out there searching for potential victims, for the fact that offenders, there's a lot of places out there that they may go, and through their life, they discover that, oh, if I'm looking for a single female, that where do I go? You go, you can go to a restaurant and you can sit there and you may go there more than once until you find a certain waitress that doesn't have a wedding ring, or you strike up a conversation or you overhear about them breaking up with their boyfriend, or you may have a discussion with them there, or late night recreational areas, or bars, or parks, or supermarkets. There's a lot of different ways these individuals, these predators, are able to target single females, and which should make us all stand back and realize and be aware of your situation and situational awareness at all times. Olivia too. I've wondered if he wasn't after Dylan, but never found her. Maybe why she went into zombie mode. Plus, Gonzalez's dad said that he didn't have to go upstairs. That is, but he went upstairs, and so would he have been able to? And that's something else that in law enforcement, that part of our training of gathering data whenever we were putting residents under surveillance, that if you come home at a certain time and it's dark, you can see the path and you can build an understanding of a residence, of what doors is commonly entered by different individuals living there, what lights are turned on in different parts of the house upon entry. And it's pretty easy to build up a profile of movement within a house by certain individuals, especially at night. Mark, and this is a good point, Mark, that they have, is that they both were organized and they both went and carried a weapon. I doubt either one planned to deal with more than one victim, very possible. But at some point, they did target others. Both almost got away with it. RA self-reporting and BK the DNA. I agree. Josh the Bosch has been a member for 24 months. Poor Steve and my terrible twos now sunglasses. I appreciate you being with me for 2 years. Thank you. Alexa says, I agree, Mr. Steve. This crime screams revenge. In my opinion, he was probably obsessed with one of the girls, Kaylee and her parent. The other three were tactical homicides. I like that. I've never heard that term, tactical homicides. Interesting. I like that. You may have coined a phrase there. Or I may have seen it and never paid attention to it. Marion Tate, was there any dogs in the house? Yes, there was one upstairs. Josh the Posh. has gifted 10 True Crime Web memberships. Thank you. Appreciate that. It means a lot to us. How did he get in the house? I would expect that watching criminals and having been on stakeouts and that ever how they egress from a crime scene, that's how they come in. Ingress, egress is the same. So if he went out the back door, he came in the back door. The only sometimes you will have that if there's a window entered, that they may go out a door, but unless we have evidence of a screen being removed or a window being forced, then if you don't have that type of evidence of that occurring, typically whichever way they exit is the same way of free entry. Yes, Josh Bishop. I take a bath with my rubber ducky. Oh man, I'm not even going to touch that. I'm not. Oh, y'all just realize what went through my mind there. Oh, oh man. Bama said that Saint, if Phantom of the Opera starts playing, run for your life. Richard Allen watched shows on crimes committed. Alexis says, that's absolutely. I think BK was messed up way before 2020. Yes, if his history is true, and we saw that even with Delphi, that there is a history there of mental issues. So they both have those in common. Mark says, next time you go to Jiffy Lube, watch how fast they apply the protective floor mats, steering wheel, and plastic seat cover before the mechanic gets behind the wheel. I just witnessed that last week. Excellent point. Yeah, anytime you have an essay, it can be so many different reasons and fantasy wise. Beth, thank you. DNA was new during Oklahoma OK trial. Yeah, I don't know which trial that was. Cyber Warrior, hello. Bamasin has been a member for 19 months. Happy Webiversary. Thank you. Appreciate your support. Yeah, it's amazing. And like I said, there's a name for that. Of course, I can't never pronounce it or remember it, of where opposite sex becomes fascinated with these individuals that are serving time. The witness may have been hesitant to call LE before LE had warned, because LE had warned them in the past. Should be a law passed if you're under influence, but need LE not to fear arrest. That's a good point. And I agree with the Saint. If this isn't DP, then you don't know what is. I agree. Bama Sin, $19. Happy 19 months. Thank you. Appreciate your support. Stephanie, good to see you. Jill Moser. T. Cancella, good to see you. Mustang 65. And this is something that possibly, I think he went back because he remembered leaving the sheath. Very possible. That and other things could have occurred. But yes, that's one of the possibilities. And this is a good possibility also where Saint says, I think he went back to see almost as if what you see with arsonists, what's going on with what my masterpiece I created last night. There is that possibility. And yes, yes, that delay is something. And, um, uh, you know, what was that reasoning? Don't know. Eh, Paula says, Mr. T, how did he get into the house? I would probably imagine the sliding glass door that was at the back on the lower level or the mid level. I'm just speculating there. I know that they processed that door as far as fingerprint powders and things, but of course, that's where he was seen leading out of. Mr. Steve, in Delphi, why wasn't every single CCTV camera footage not gathered? It's a small town, and definitely possible they could have found RA car multiple times. So frustrating. I feel they were lazy. I agree, and of course, they did recover some camera footage. The FBI at from a local service station that turned out to be lost or destroyed or overwritten, and that has been an issue. But you would expect um, that they would have, and they didn't for whatever reason. Uh, no explanation. We know better now. The same. Yes, I understand, and we should be critical of law enforcement. We deserve better. I never worried about being criticized. I mean, I worried about it, but I try to do my best job, and so that there's very little to be attacked if you do your job. Cyber warrior, the eyes are the window to the soul, as the saying goes. And this is a good point from Anna that the offender did cross state lines. FBI was probably needed from the beginning. I would think so. When did he connect to Wi-Fi? I know he connected multiple. He connected in certain areas or was able to be identified. I think they said in one of the probable calls at least 12 times. Was it all of that exactly with um, uh, and how specific would that be? We'll learn far more during the trial. Oh, Yvette says, I was gifted a membership. Thank you. Absolutely. Did it ever come out? Yes, there was some IDs being in those boxes, and I'm sure law enforcement would look at the circumstances of how those IDs could have got there. Marion Tate said, my opinion is that sounded like he was trying to get away with a perfect crime and didn't. I agree. Yeah, that is something. Leaving the sheath under a victim, leaving the cell phone under Delphi victims. Yeah, he's that he was just trying to cover the bodies. Yeah, I don't really go with that, but I don't know. Okay, Banner Line says that Christian Bale played the rich, sophisticated stockbroker investment banker. Okay. Teresa the troll. Oh, he's on vacation at the beach. Good for you. Everybody's congratulating the beach goers. P. Consuelo says, you covet what you see every day. Ah, what is that? That's from the Silence of the Lambs. Excellent. Mark Ferris, that Moscow is a legendary, or is known for the ladies. And if I was a single dude at University of Washington, you'd go and make that drive to Moscow. Very possible. Yes, I do think that he was by himself. The only time I ever thought that there was another involved was early on before he was identified, when law enforcement said that they mentioned something about the lookouts and possibly more than one in the vehicle. Um, I I personally don't think either. I think that he had some supporting similar type of crimes, maybe not as violent, but most definitely believe that there's other crimes that fall hand in hand with those that have fantasies and commit crimes based upon fantasies. It's called crazy. Allegedly, Lisa. Oh man, y'all funny. Look at Wade Wilson with all his sister's wives. Last count, I believe there's 15 claiming to be his fiance. Hmm. Do you think the attorney believes BK is innocent? Have you ever heard a defense attorney say such a thing in the courthouse about a client? Yeah, all defense attorneys. I mean, even you look at the defense attorneys that were covering Delphi. I am never shocked by anything that a defense attorney will say. as someone stated earlier, they have some pretty interesting imaginations. Well, with Delphi, though, Mark says, wouldn't be surprised after Delphi, every other small town PD made a point to get the FBI and state police CSI on the scene ASAP. It was clear Delphi was mismanaged before the arrest. But, and that's the thing, though, that the crime scene with Delphi was processed by the state CSI. The way I've interpreted it and read it, that they were ISP CSI team. I may have got that wrong, but that's the way I read the reporting. Thank you, Kinsella. Yes, it's in July of next year, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go look right quick. I got it. I've got it here in my notes. I think I've got the exact trial date. Yes, the state of Idaho says that Kohberger's trial is scheduled for August 11th to November the 7th, 2025. I knew I had my notes somewhere. Now, let me pull up my screen again. So it's later than I thought it was. Aquarium 1, good to see you. Barbara Hall, good to see you again. I lost you there for a little bit. Yeah, Josh is like me. I saw her early on and then disappeared. I don't know if I just missed it or what. All right. And it says, Anna says, I wonder if the odinous garbage is what defense attorneys do when they say publicly that their client is innocent. And then he confesses 61 times. Makes sense. Oh, me. But guys, like I said, I'm looking forward to finding more out about this case as we move forward. I'm hoping it's going to be televised. The hearings currently are, which is far more than what we got to see with the Delphi case. And so if that's any indicator that cameras will be in the courtroom, I hope it is. And if you have any information regarding this case, absolutely make sure that that information is known to the defense and the prosecution for the fact that we have to have justice. But y'all stay safe out there, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.